Welcome back to the PFF NFL Draft, Episode 2. Senior Bowl recap here. I'm Mike Renner, and we have some new faces joining us. The flu has been running rampant through PFF. Steve Palazzolo completely lost his voice. I was incapacitated for a few days, but we've got our Senior Bowl team joining us today, Jordan Plocher and Josh Liskiewitz. How are you guys doing today?
Outstanding, Mike. How are you, buddy?
Doing great. Great to have you guys back on here. You were there all week long, down in Mobile, looking over the dudes down there, checking them out in their underwear. Anyone stand out from you there? Just right off the bat, anyone really pop?
Just in the underwear and the underwear Olympics portion?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. I mean, I think Uchenna Nwosu, the edge from USC, I guess he looked pretty rock solid in his underwear. Because, I mean, let's be honest, when you see those guys, what you're really looking at is who would make like a cool looking action figure. You know what I mean? That's what you're really looking at. And I had to say, like, Nwosu would definitely have like the coolest of the action figure body types that I saw there. Josh, anybody as far as their bodies stand out to you at the weigh-ins?
Honestly, that was one of the more unremarkable weigh-ins as far as that goes. No super outliers on either end.
Boo. I do remember Tano passing you on last year, and Obi Melifonwu were like Greek gods.
Yes, they were. Yes.
Really helped them. They really won the weigh-in. But we'll get to the more interesting portion of the Senior Bowl here, what actually happened in the practices, in the games. And I think the most overriding conversation, the thing everyone really paid attention to, was the fact that there were quarterbacks there that are legitimately could go in the top 5. Multiple guys there, one being Josh Allen, other being Baker Mayfield. Josh Allen, they're fitting him for his Hall of Fame jacket after his performance already this week. But both those guys had good weeks. What did you see from so we've been low on Josh Allen. What did you see from him, Josh, throughout the week that just in terms of your general thoughts coming away from the game and the week?
Honestly, during the week, I didn't think he had a good week.
For him, though. We're talking about for him.
For his standards, okay. But, I mean, his standards are still, if we're talking top 5, his standards have to be better than what our grades are. So I don't think he showed much beyond that. I mean, his accuracy was still all over the place throughout the week. He had some one-on-ones that were pretty solid. He would flash every once in a while. He make those 1 or 2 throws that make you say, okay, that's what NFL teams are going to fall in love with. That's fine, but you can't have 1 or 2 of those and have 4, 5, 6 calls that you just airmail. And not to mention the mental aspect of it in terms of just staring guys down, not really reading defenses properly. I didn't really see any progression as far as that goes, especially compared to some other guys like Luke Falk, who might obviously don't have the arm talent, but mentally are just so far ahead of him.
Yeah, Allen for the week of the one-on-ones, like you mentioned. He was the second highest graded quarterback for us. Had 7 drops, was the second best accuracy percentage in those one-on-ones. But that's the thing, is that that's not where Josh Allen, that's not the concern for Josh Allen. Everyone knows he has this fantastic arm. It's when he gets in the actual games and has to read defenses that's been the issue for him over the course of his career. Although he did end up grading well in the actual game, was the highest graded quarterback for us in the actual Senior Bowl. So at least encouraging there for him. If you're an NFL GM, though, like, he's going to go top 5, right, at this point after this week?
Well, if I'm an NFL,
I'm just saying, like, put yourself in actual NFL GM shoes, not your shoes, but at this rate, he's going top 5 after what we saw from him, right? Like, just after all the buzz that we've seen and all the thing about his arm.
I still couldn't do it. What you're still seeing is basically a big lump of quarterback clay, and again, can someone chisel that into something that's, consistently able to deliver the ball accurately, in addition to reading the defenses. I mean, he did grade well in the game, but like I said in the recap article, if you look at it, it was basically all of his grade came out of 3 throws that were basically the same throw. It was like this, vertical down the right side, they almost looked identical. So he basically got his one shot in, a couple times, and it connected. That was it. I mean, there were times in the practice week where you could have maybe got hit by an errant pass. It wasn't necessarily pretty during portions of it. So you're really asking, can your coaching staff create, what you think he can be? And so I don't know. I couldn't do that at five, the top five for me. It'd just be too much risk.
Yeah, on the same token, I do kind of expect that's where he will go. I couldn't tell you which team will take that gamble, but NFL teams...
The Jets.
Well, it could very well be the Jets, obviously. But it's just one of those things where, different teams are going to value different traits. If your trait is accuracy, which I think it should be. I think it should be number one as far as quarterbacks. It doesn't matter to me how hard or soft you throw the ball. If you can't hit the broadside of a barn, I don't think you belong being a starting quarterback in the NFL. So I don't remember the writer we talked to, but one of our buddies we talked to down at Senior Bowl had this great analogy for him in terms of, in the past, you could be Fort Sumter. You could just launch the cannonball and you could hit it anywhere on the fort and you're doing your job. Well, that's not the way the NFL works right now. You need laser-guided missiles, and he's not very guided right now, and that's an issue going forward. So, again, as Jordan said, there's going to be a team probably in that top five that's going to say, we have the coaching staff. We just want the clay. We just want the tools. We will create a bigger, stronger, better tomato. And I wouldn't be on board with that, but I think it's going to happen.
That is, I actually really like that point. The fact that if you look at passing games over the last 10 years, what wins in the NFL is completely different than what won at the quarterback position in 2003, 2004. Yeah, at the same time, people are still using the same tried and true methods of what a quarterback should be, or what a franchise quarterback looks like coming out of college, that were true in the 90s, true in the 80s, when the position couldn't be more different at this point. It's just a completely different game if you watch it. So, yeah, that's actually a very good point. And Allen is going to be your litmus test for which one you hold more stock in. But let's turn the coin to Baker Mayfield, the other big name quarterback there. And Jordan, you've been notably lower on him than pretty much everyone else here at PFF. Have some knocks on him. What was your takeaways from him throughout the week?
It started out pretty, rough for him that first day because they were take a lot of snaps under center, and he fumbled a couple of them. And then, every quarterback there that first day is suffering from miscommunication issues with the receivers. But he out of the week of practice, I thought he had the strongest week of practice. Accurate. I think the grade showed that as well. I think he ended up grading far better than any other quarterback during the week of practice. I think the things that impressed me the most about him when I was there was, again, just his sort of practice demeanor. He'd be the first guy to go up there and, and smack his friends and say good game, or just sort of go up there and correct a teammate on a rep or something, or talk about it, about a rep with somebody. So I really liked seeing that. And again, I think that was really valuable for him, for all these NFL front offices to all be seeing these really positive practice habits that they're going to want to see out of their leader there. So he was really, really impressive in that aspect. He only played 12 snaps in the game, but didn't perform very well in the game. And then that's where some of the concerns that I have, and I know Josh has as well too, about some of his footwork and his base and stuff like that sort of came into play. And Josh saw some of that too during the week of practice, I know, right, Josh?
Yeah, it was interesting because Steve and I have talked about this quite a bit in terms of if what you're doing works from a mechanical, physical sense, why change it? Well, that's all well and good, and I tend to agree with that. That's probably the way to go, but that's not what's going to happen in the NFL. And the NFL is going to look at his sort of wind-up delivery. They're going to look at his extremely wide base, and they're going to want to fix that up. And so throughout the week, we would see reps where his feet would just be off. You could tell he's thinking about whatever coaching he was taking in, probably some leading up to the week from training and some during the week from coaches as well. But there would be times where he would just have his wide stance and he might hop around a little bit. It just wouldn't look comfortable like you saw with a Mike White, whose mechanical mechanics, his lower body are just so fluid in everything he does. And while it didn't affect his accuracy during practice, I don't think it's sustainable the way it is now. And it was definitely an issue during the game. I mean, there are a couple of throws there where he's trying to climb the pocket. He actually kind of short steps and still has that windup, so it's a really awkward throw down the sideline, and he overthrows an open guy for what should have been a big play. He had a couple other throws too where he might overstride and just didn't get the proper torque, and I think it was a post route, correct me if I'm wrong, Jordan, where he did this and the defender was able to key on him the whole time and break on the ball and break it up because it was slightly off target. But you put all those together, and I still have worries about how he translates to the next level.
Yeah, I do think his feet, if there's one knock on him, at least in the pocket, he just doesn't seem to always have himself in a comfortable throwing situation. That can lead to the overstriding, can lead to other things. He just doesn't have that quiet feet, that sort of presence with it to always stay on balance, to where then he gets himself in a bad position, and all of a sudden, when you're in a bad position, that ball is not going where you want it to go. So that would be my biggest knock. And obviously, it's not something you're going to correct over 1 week of practice.
Of course not.
It's something that he's going to have to answer for when it comes to the NFL. And when you're a short quarterback, when you are, just a shade over 6 foot, you can't really afford to have those flaws like that, because teams are looking for every single excuse to knock you down their board. Like we've seen, I think there was even an anonymous scout or GM came out this week just saying you can't take a guy 6 foot top 5, just like you can't. I mean, there aren't a ton of 6 foot quarterbacks in the NFL, but it's like that belief that, you can't take that guy 6 foot top, like that leads to you not drafting Drew Brees highly. That leads to you not drafting Russell Wilson highly, whereas those guys are franchised. Two of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL are both around 6 foot. So I think that thinking is outdated, but I do think that while he played well this week, he's not doing enough for himself to play himself into that top 5 mix.
Two other points I want to make with that real quick, Mike. First off, those two quarterbacks, certainly those are the examples he wants to put out, but there's still the exception to the rule. There's really been no other quarterbacks in the last 40 years in the NFL with his level of height that succeeded. And then you take his wide base, and he's playing much shorter than he actually is. So, I mean, that's pretty significant to me, and certainly in terms of draft stock. I think, as you said, regardless of what we think, that's something that is probably going to knock him down. And also, one other point on the feet and not being comfortable, that is extremely important when you're a player like him that likes to improvise as much as he does. You have to be able to get your feet centered and get right when you're on the move. And the fact that he doesn't, and he likes to scramble out and extend plays, that's a big concern for me.
Yeah, 100% on both those. I agree. They weren't the only two quarterbacks there, though. There were a handful of other guys that some played well, some did not help themselves out. Anyone, Jordan, any of the other groups stand out to you in a good or bad sense?
Yeah, I mean, the two guys really stood out to me. That would be like Kyle Lauletta from Richmond, and also Mike White from Western Kentucky. I'll let Josh talk about him a little bit more. But Kyle Lauletta, the first day of practice, I remember everything's happening so fast, and I'm jotting down notes, and a lot of my notes were about him missing throws. And so, when you go back and you compile, I'm just thinking, oh man, this guy looked like he kind of missed a bit, but he got like really, really better as the week progressed, at least again when I got to see him more and more. And then by Thursday, I even wrote about it. It was really impressing me with his red zone accuracy when they were doing red zone 7-on-7s and things like that, even red zone 11-on-11s. And just really impressed with his ball placement and accuracy in the red zone. And then by the time the game came around, he owned the second half of the game. I mean, he was really, really impressive. But his overall grade was 76.6, and then in practice he completed 91% of his one-on-ones, which was really impressive as well. So I thought he really stood out and helped himself a ton.
Josh, Mike White.
I like Mike White quite a bit. Accuracy wasn't quite there on a consistent basis, but I'm not too worried about that based off his film. Especially, I love the fact that he's in the past been so accurate deep, and I think we saw glimpses of that certainly during the game. He had that beautiful deep ball to DJ Chark. But you look at the mechanics again. I kind of mentioned him earlier, comparing him to Baker Mayfield in that perspective. He's just always under control, always over his feet. One of the issues we had with him coming into the season was he tended to take something off too many of his throws, didn't always show a big arm, and I think he dispels some of those rumors, some of those concerns this week. I thought he showed he had the arm strength to make those crosshash out throws, and he can step in and torque balls, something he didn't always show at Western Kentucky. So I was also impressed with some of the mental things he did. And you saw it in the game a couple times, too. There's a safety crashing over, so he throws the ball closer to the boundary. Next time, gets the same coverage, just looks the safety completely off, and that's on the deep ball to Chark. So the safety didn't have any chance to get over there and defend that pass. Just little things like that he's already doing. You're not seeing so much from other guys, and in particular Josh Allen. That's not something we're going to see from him right now at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did. I was impressed with White's arm, like you mentioned. You watch his game tape, and it seems like he's always sort of just like touching it in there, throwing a lot of, always seems like he's taking something off. In the practice, in the one-on-ones, it seemed like he was almost overthrowing at times. He really was humming it. His arm strength definitely stood out in that group. I will say, though, I agree with Jordan. Lauletta was, to me, the most impressive, helped himself the most. In my eyes, I obviously had almost no experience looking at him. We did not grade Richmond this season. We have only, I think, two games of him in the last 2 years graded well in one of them last year against Virginia, but no game tape on him. He, in terms of just ball placement in the one-on-ones, was by far the best. He just was putting it where it needed to be. Even on the simple hitches, his ball placement was, to me, the best on those. Really impressive to watch. Had not great arm strength, but adequate arm strength, a little bit of a hitch in his sort of reminded me of Kevin Hogan in terms of how he brings the ball back. But I need to see more of this guy, because that, to me, when you can throw that accurately on all levels of the defense, that's one of the number one things I look for in a quarterback. So yeah, I don't know if even watching the Richmond tape will help me out, but that he's put himself on definitely my draft radar going forward, so I'll have to look more into him. But Jordan, you wrote up 15 guys here coming out of the game who helped themselves the most throughout the week. Any of those guys really stand out to me? Any guys you want to talk about here briefly? Lauletta being one of them.
So many of them. I mean, yeah, Lauletta, again, he was by far the best quarterback in the game, I thought. Again, just really impressive. And again, for him facing that uptick in competition, that was huge for him. Because, for him to show up there and just look better than everybody else in the game, and that he's playing, the best of the best, that was a big week for him. Some of the other guys who really stood out, too, some of the guards stood out. Isaiah Wynn, the guard from Georgia, he won 80% of his pass rush one-on-ones during the week. Will Hernandez, also the guard from UTEP, stood out. But again, Mike White, again, Josh already touched on it, really stood out for me. There was a whole bunch of guys. I know Okoronkwo, I'll let Josh probably speak on him more. Okoronkwo really stood out in practice. And what he can do. He kind of sort of changed our opinion on him a little bit, and what we think he can do at the next level with what he showed there. So he was really impressive on the defensive side as well.
Yeah, I like the guards you mentioned there, Isaiah Wynn, Will Hernandez. Hernandez especially, because to me, just such an easy evaluation in terms of his strengths and weaknesses. He is, basically a Mike Iupati clone, in terms of he will just crush a double team all day long, but he will get off balance pretty easily in pass protection. Never going to be an amazing pass protector, but he is who he is, and that's, you love guys like that, because that's just going to translate to the next level pretty easily. So anyone, Josh, do you really stand out as well?
Yeah, I think Okoronkwo, again, is worth mentioning here. Played really well in the game. I think he had an 89.0 overall grade in the game. Interesting thing with him was that day one, he had a lot of struggles, in particular on the one-on-one pass rush drills. I don't think he won any of his 3 reps that day. So he ended up winning 50% for the week, but I thought he got better and better and more confident as the week went on. And, he showed he can move off the ball as well, too. And when you think about today's NFL, so many teams looking for those hybrid players at that position that can rush the passer, defend the run, and drop in coverage. I think he's one of your guys, and I think he might have solidified himself as a potential first-round prospect. And another guy that bears mentioning here, I'm going to talk a little bit more about later, but Darius Leonard, inside linebacker from South Carolina State. Again, a smaller school, not a guy that we've graded, but I think to me the biggest compliment that we can give to a player in a Senior Bowl sitting, certainly from a PFF perspective, is that we want to watch your film. And certainly Laletta falls in that crowd, and now Darius Leonard does too. Again, talking about how he was in coverage. He was outstanding in coverage all week, excellent in the game. He played virtually every snap in the game and was an absolute stud. But I want to see more of Darius Leonard too, because he really stood out this week.
All right, let's get to the one-on-ones recap. We touched on them there just a little bit, some of the numbers, but just going to highlight some standouts. In the O-line, D-line ones, as Jordan mentioned, Isaiah Wynn, he was the top offensive lineman, 80% win rate in that. UCLA center/guard Scott Quisenberry was the worst in the one-on-ones. He had only a 17% win rate on 12 snaps. Not great. BJ Hill, the NC State defensive tackle, was actually the highest graded defensive lineman in the one-on-ones this week. He won 73% of his reps. Really big week for him there. And then just touching on some of the edge guys, like you said, Okoronkwo, 50% win rate. Kamoko Toure, 55% win rate. Shaquem Griffin, when he got in there on 3 reps, won all 3 of them. And then Marcus Davenport, only a 38% win rate. He is a guy who probably came out of the Senior Bowl not helping himself, we'll say.
Yeah, he's an interesting case, too. And on our serious show, Steve and I talked about him a little bit because at that point it was already clear he was struggling throughout the week. And I said that it kind of reminded me of Ziggy Ansah when he came in from BYU. A lot of the stuff was brand new. He was just struggling during the week. And I said, maybe he'll be unleashed in the game and he'll have a big game. And that's exactly what happened with Davenport, too. So I think he righted the ship a bit. What did he have, Jordan? I think he had a sack,
84.0
4 other pressures, and he scored a touchdown on a fumble recovery as well. So he at least helped himself there. But still, I think when you're looking at the edge position, looking at a linebacker in particular, because size-wise, strength, I don't think you really want him as a down lineman in a 43. I think a guy like Okoronkwo will probably put himself ahead of Davenport.
Yeah, all right, on to the wide receivers versus the DBs in the one-on-ones. Jamon Moore out of Mizzou and James Washington, they tied for the highest win rate among James Washington out of Oklahoma State, the highest win rate among wide receivers for the week. Jaleel Scott, the New Mexico State wide receiver, lowest graded, lowest win rate, only 20% of his routes he won. Not great there for him. On the other side of the ball, Christian Campbell had the highest win rate among defensive backs with a 40% win rate. A couple guys didn't win a single rep. Demontre Wade, though, 17 reps, didn't win a single one. That's unfortunate for him. Anyone stand out to you guys in the one-on-ones there?
Kalen Ballage, actually, the ASU running back, stood out a lot with his pass-catching ability during the week. He's really going to be a dynamic player at the next level because he's someone that you can use effectively in the pass game, like the way that the Cardinals use a David Johnson or something like that. He's big, around the same size, but again, like his ability to be a powerful runner and still also juke people with that weight and then still be a factor in the pass game is really impressive.
Yeah, I saw people even talking about him as a possible H-back at the next level in terms of playing tight end, that sort of thing, being more of a pass catcher than even a runner. Do you see that as a possible fit for him? Obviously, being that good as a receiver is going to help you out in that regard.
No, I don't, honestly. He can do that. So, I guess people say, well, he can, so let's do that. Well, I'm saying, he can, so let's not do that. Let's let him be a running back who can also, motion out and do all those other fun things, he could still, run with power, in between the tackles. And run through people and get you yards after contact that we like to track. But he can also juke people in the hole. I would still give him touches. I would give him targets. I would use him in a myriad of ways.
The thing that always just I can't wrap my head around is how much stock people put in the Senior Bowl, and the fact that we just mentioned Kalen Ballage, we mentioned Isaiah Wynn. We mentioned all of these guys who, they crushed in the one-on-ones. These are 20 reps throughout the week. This is, a third of a game in terms of how many reps you're getting. Yes, I know it's against better competition than you'll usually see, but these guys have thousands of snaps on film to be judged off of. And then you see it every year. Someone, shoots up draft boards because, they dominated the Senior Bowl. Do you guys, how much stock do you put in an evaluation with how a guy did here at the Senior Bowl?
To me, it's really a tiebreaker. There are obviously going to be guys that it helps more than others, in particular the smaller school guys. So like a Darius Leonard, that's a pretty big deal for him to go against that level of competition that we otherwise wouldn't see. Mm-hmm. But there's so many other cases that, I've been going for the last 10 straight years where I've seen guys just dominate the Senior Bowl that I knew weren't great players based on their actual film, and end up getting overdrafted. I think the reason for that is twofold. One, in terms of media, they just aren't watching games that way. They're when they watch college games, they're watching the quarterback, they're watching the ball, so they kind of have an idea of what's happening there, but they don't really know what's all is going around them. So this is a chance where, hey, they're watching one-on-one reps for the first time.
So much easier to evaluate. It's yes. Where my eye is. It's
Exactly. And as far as teams go, this is the first time that coaches get to look at these players. They're not watching the college film on them yet. They're prepping for their NFL schedule. So for so many of them, that's their first impression. So if a player makes a really positive first impression on them in this capacity, I think that ends up elevating them oftentimes too far above to where they should be. A guy that's I think is going to fall in the other end of that this week is Marcel Aitman from Oklahoma State. Really struggled all week in terms of his route running, gaining separation. Even at the catch point, I don't think he was very consistent either. Not at the level of Jaleel Scott, but it still wasn't a great week for him. But, he was a guy we all loved on film, and I think is going to be a better pro prospect than he showed this week. But I wouldn't be surprised to see teams look at him, especially comparing him to James White, his own teammate, who had both the production on the field throughout the last couple years at Oklahoma State and during practice. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Aitman kind of tumble a little bit in terms of his draft stock for at least a good portion of teams.
The other thing I love about Senior Bowl is how anyone can say a guy had a good week. It's like,
yeah.
And if you catch the right reps at the right time, and that's all you see of a guy, because while it is easy to isolate guys, like it's very difficult to actually watch every single thing that happens at practice. Like things are going on at the same time a lot of times. Like your eye's not always locked in. If you're talking to anyone else, it's difficult to pay attention intently enough to evaluate. Now, we obviously get the game film, and that's why we grade every single rep one-on-one and in the game and in the practices. But a lot of guys that are just there watching, it's like, oh yeah, I saw 3 good things from him. That must mean he had a good week. And that always just cracks me up, comparing the takes that come out of it to our grades after the fact.
Oh, that's such a big deal. It's one thing for us to be able to grade every rep. That's something that no one has been able to even approach before us. But also the way we approach even the guys that are there, they're not grading, they're present. We have one person watching quarterbacks, wide receivers, and cornerbacks because they're always in the same groups. They're always going against each other. We have one person watching running backs, linebackers. They probably get a peek at safeties as well. And then we have another guy watching O-line, D-line all day. So we're not trying to everybody's spread thin watching 100 different guys in every practice. We're focusing in on position groups. You get a better feel for all those guys in the groups that way, and you get a better feel for exactly what happened throughout that week at practice that way.
There you have it. That's the Senior Bowl. Good week down in Mobile. Not sure it really matters in terms of actually evaluating prospects that much, but we have to talk about it because this is the PFF Draft Show. Let's get, though, into some segments right now, and I'm going to kick it off with my hot take of the week. I've been really pouring over this one over the last month, wanting to get it out there. It's not that hot of a take. This one's more of just an opinion that I think is widely held but needs to be repeated. And it's the fact that in a draft evaluation, when you have an opinion on a player, being low on someone who turns out good. So saying, Deion Jones, calling him a 6th rounder like we did, or 7th rounder, is a much better proposition value-wise than being extremely high on someone who turns out to be bad. So if you said Greg Robinson, he's a top 5 pick, lock offensive lineman, he's going to be left tackle in the next 10 years, you end up drafting him in the top 5. You end up drafting him 2nd overall, and you're stuck with this guy who you had a poor evaluation on. But on the other side of the coin, if you don't draft Deion Jones, you can still draft a good player if you have your other evaluations correct. So I think when looking at draft evaluations, that is something that needs to be kept in mind, that being low on a guy who turns out good is much better than the opposite. Hot take.
That's not very hot take, Mike.
Damn it. I know it wasn't, and I knew it wasn't.
But it makes sense. It
does make
logical.
sense.
Yeah.
You want that return on the capital. You know what I mean? That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's...
the key to that,
feel
as
like
you said,
getting something wrong, like everyone always looks at just getting someone wrong as equal is why I say that.
Right. The key to that, as you said, is you still have the opportunity to take someone good. Now, you could always end up being, what's a good example? The Detroit Lions passing on Aaron Donald at a position of need because you're not going to be able to keep Sue, and you end up taking a tight end who can't block or catch consistently. You could end up doing that, but they did have the opportunity to take another good player, I guess you could say.
Yes. So, in that draft, what was it? Who the Vikings passed also on Donald and drafted someone who is Anthony Barr, right, in that one. So it's like you got a good player still. Now, obviously, you passed on a generational talent, but you still had the opportunity to draft a good player. If you were high on someone like us in that same draft, like I said, Greg Robinson, the Rams, you didn't have that opportunity to, even though they still did, which one of the funnier drafts of all time, how they picked one of the biggest draft busts followed by the biggest draft hit. So
yeah,
that's my hot take of the week. Like I said, not that hot of a take, but something I had to get off my chest and that I'm going to pound the table on moving forward. And with that in mind, we're going to go to some past scouting reports, reviving one of the segments that we loved so much last year. Every week, every time we do a scouting report on a guy we sort of missed on and a scouting report on a guy we think we sort of hit on. So first up, this is the 2016 cornerback class. Not going to tell you who this is, but I'm going to read some excerpts from a scouting report. Now, here's what he did best. Excellent movement skills, reads and breaks on routes quickly, plays multiple coverages, adept at playing press man off or any zone concept, smart player, reads plays well in zone. When in press, uses movement skills to mirror rather than actually pressing. Always seems to have an eye on the quarterback, reacts and closes on passes quickly. Good ball skills, turns bad throws into interceptions. Only allowed 2 touchdowns in 2 seasons. Now here's his biggest concerns. Teams can use his aggressiveness on underneath passes against him. Showed susceptibility to double moves. Looked like had speed issues at times on deep passes. Eyes the quarterback too much and guesses. Can overcommit to the outside and press and open himself up too quickly. Gets out-muscled at the catch point too often against bigger receivers. That, of course, was the 18th overall player on our big board in 2016, Vernon Hargraves, who's since not nearly been worth, ended up being the 11th overall pick, not nearly been worth that draft selection there.
Yeah, you see some of those things
wonder,
pop up.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying you see some of those things pop up, especially with the getting pushed around a little bit. But go ahead, Josh.
No, I was going to say, we liked Tease Tabor a ton last year too, and he could barely get on the field for Detroit in a position that they really needed him to be able to. I wonder if there might be something to that at Florida, if at least initially for whatever reason there's a transition period that needs to be taken into account with Florida corners. Maybe it's the way they're being schooled. I don't know. I'm not saying I have anything there, but
I do.
We got another Florida corner this year that we like a lot, and that kind of needs to be brought up with that, doesn't it?
Yeah, I do think so, because a lot of even those strengths we were saying, turns, bad throws, interceptions, has, breaks on routes, in zone coverages, his breaks on routes were something that we highlighted as, a positive. And he had a ton of pass breakups at Florida. And then he gets to the NFL and he has 2 picks, or he has a single pick in his career, only 10 pass breakups in 2 seasons, where, that was his calling card, was the fact that, maybe he's going to get burnt sometimes, but he's going to be making plays on passes. That really hasn't been him. I don't know if it's Tampa Bay, how they play their corners, what it is, but maybe it's the learning curve. But man, he really, him and Eli Apple, the 2 top corners in that draft, have not panned, we'll say.
Yeah, and I think it's sometimes in college, those guys that have those huge gaudy stats, they're just sitting on routes in college. They're in zone. They're playing coverages. They're not typically playing in the NFL, where you got to play a lot of 1, a lot of 3, where you're moving backwards. You're pressed up on a guy, and I think that might be part of it with him. And certainly we've seen it in the past with others as well.
All right, let's get to one we were a little better on in terms of our evaluation. Like I said, Vernon Hargreaves was 18th overall on our big board. Here's another corner from that 2016 class. What he does best: smooth athlete that can match receivers and run with them down the field. Has ball skills, picked off 5 passes this season, broke up 13. Was not shied away from. Had 97 targets this past year and only allowed 46 catches. Excellent recovery speed. Even when he misses the jam, can still get back into receivers. Competes for the ball, actively fighting to force ball out of catch points rather than simply making tackle after the catch has already been given up. Biggest concern, mental lapses on tape. Motion caused big issues for him in terms of passing off coverages. Could have a bumpy learning curve coming from a small school to the next level. That was none other than Cincinnati Bengals cornerback William Jackson III, who pretty much dominated this past season in limited time, and he was the 15th overall player on our big board. So,
and it's also worth saying that he missed his rookie year with injury.
Yes.
So this was essentially his rookie year on the field, and he still played really, really well.
Yeah, lowest catch rate
really
among all corners, only 15 catches all year. Yeah, 15th overall on our big board. So we had him ahead of Eli Apple, had him ahead of Vernon Hargreaves. So
nice.
Sort of retrospect. Yeah. One to pat myself on the back about, considering both those guys really fizzled out. We still, like I said, we still had Hargreaves first rounder, still had Apple as borderline first rounder. So
Jackson's
didn't
so
knock that one out
good.
of the park, but
so good. Yeah, that the thing that really stands out. I mean, I know all of us are really high in him personally. The thing that really stands out to me the most about that pick, though, is that the rumors around the water cooler was that the Steelers were going to take William Jackson. They were really high on him and that they were going to take him in the draft, and then the Bengals just swooped in and got him. That's right. Turned out really well for the Bengals, and it weakened the Steelers at the same time.
Yeah, Steelers then drafted Artie Burns.
Which
could have been William Jackson. So, yeah, it was a really, really clutch, AFC North power move by the Bengals there.
Yeah. The thing about his report that you just read that stands out to me, Mike, is his recovery ability. And that's so important for a corner, because ultimately you're going to get beat. So what do you do once you get beat? And if you're able to get back involved, not panic, take a penalty, or just get completely toasted, if you can get involved some way and still potentially break up a pass, that is just a huge, huge trait to be able to have.
Yeah, he ran a 4.37 at the combine, and it shows up. It showed up a lot this past year. When he was guarding Antonio Brown, like that, you're not going to completely jam Antonio Brown. You're not going to not allow separation. But once he did, he was right there back at the catch point because he has that speed advantage on Antonio Brown. He is faster than him. So, yeah, I think that showed up definitely on tape and definitely one that some teams wish they could have had back if we're doing a redo for 2016. All right, let's go to a new segment that we're going to debut here called Guess That Prospect. Going to give 5 clues in order of from pretty vague to more specific. Say when you know it, Josh and Jordan, so the people at home can play to see if they beat you. Don't say immediately who it is. Okay, just FYI. Don't yell out a name.
I know it. I know it already.
Dang it! You beat me.
All right. First clue was a 2-star prospect from Corinth, Texas, in 2014.
Yeah, I'm never gonna know something based off of stars and all that.
Yeah,
me either.
We're going from vague to specific here. All right, number 2, sat behind a former PFF All-American.
I think I got a pretty good idea.
Number 3, played 297 snaps prior to 2017.
I think I know who it is.
Number 4 was himself a PFF All-American this past season.
Yeah.
And number 5 led the NCAA with 18 pass breakups.
Oh, I was right.
Did you get it yet, Jordan?
Come on, Jordan.
I think so.
Okay. It was none other than Iowa cornerback Joshua Jackson.
Yeah, Jordan's slow on the uptick because he has a West Coast bias. He only watches those Pac-12.
He's 3 hours behind us right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't get it to the end. We don't know about that West Coast bias, Josh. Those are just rumors.
That PFF All-American they sat behind was Desmond King, who had himself a pretty good rookie year out in L.A. All right, last segment here. Risers and fallers from the Senior Bowl. Give me your biggest. Jordan, kick us off.
We already hit about it a bunch. I thought Mike White had a really strong week, at least.
Got to give one, Jordan. Got to give one.
Okay, yeah, just Mike White.
Biggest tries. That's one. Go ahead. All right. Mike White, the quarterback, Western Kentucky. And biggest faller?
My biggest follower, I guess, for me would be New Mexico State wide receiver Jaleel Scott, who I was really high on, but just sort of looked like the uptick in competition was too much for him all week long in practice and in the game.
All right. Josh?
I am going to go with guy I already mentioned, Darius Leonard. There's just always that small school guy that steps out and really shows that he belongs, and he's at a position that's so tough right now with needing linebackers that can cover. That's such a coveted position, or at least it needs to be. So I'm going to go with him as the riser.
And your biggest faller?
I'm going to stick in the wide receiver position and, again, go with Marcel Aitman. We had worries about James Washington's ability to create separation and do anything but run downfield routes. And we saw Washington do all of that. And Aitman is the guy that struggled against physicality, struggled with the ball in the air. We weren't expecting that. And he was a big disappointment this week.
I can get on board with all of those. My biggest riser for the week, though, already touched on him. Richmond quarterback, Kyle Lauletta. Obviously, he rose
Same
from
premise.
almost zero opinion in my mind. But in terms of arm talent there, had about as good as I saw in terms, obviously defining arm talent as a mixture of accuracy and arm strength. I thought I was just enamored with what he did in the red zone on those fades. If you don't go to PFF_Sam's Twitter feed, he has a great compilation of all the fades he threw, and they are, God, they're gorgeous. That's like that's some private watching for you there late at night. So he's my biggest riser. My biggest faller, Marcus Davenport. When you're coming from a small school, you really, like UTSA is, and the competition level there, you just have to, and you sort of dominate, but he didn't dominate. He wasn't out of this world in terms of grading wise. He was just solid, similar to someone like Kyler Fackrell a few years ago, coming out of a small school.
Yeah.
You better prove it against the big competition. You better be able to have that translate to the real deal, and it wasn't even a great offensive tackle class here at the Senior Bowl, and it just didn't. In the one-on-ones where you should be, the defense has a distinct advantage. He just didn't look like the type of pass rusher I'm feeling comfortable, despite the immense amount of traits he has in the top half of the first round, or maybe even the first round from what I saw this week. So that's obviously concerning to me. Like I said, though, it's only a handful of reps. Obviously, I'm going to have to go back and watch a good deal more of the tape. But when you're that kind of guy, you better have a big week to really impress me. He didn't, so my biggest faller of the week. That's it for us, though. Hope you guys enjoy the Senior Bowl. We'll be back with some more draft content for you next week. Coming up later this week, we'll have our Super Bowl preview, and we'll be unveiling the PFF 101 next Monday. So stay tuned, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Talk to you then.